Hi everyone, thanks for checking out this video. So this lesson is going to be about something called for loops. And in Python and in computer programming in general, a loop is basically a block of code that gets repeated a bunch of times. And there's really two kinds of loops, at least in Python, two like basic types of loops. And yeah, the first one that we're going to talk about in this lesson is what's called a for loop. So I think the easiest way to explain what this is to just first show you an example and then talk about what's happening in the example. So let's just start by making a list, kind of like the list that we talked about last time. I think I'm actually just going to use the same example from the last lesson here. Just make our list. And then to make our for loop, we're going to say for item in my list, colon, and then the next line indented. It should be indented by itself if you're using idle, but if it's not, just go ahead and press the tab key to indent it yourself. So yeah, basically this is going to be a loop where every line of code that's indented under this line is going to be repeated a bunch of times. And specifically, the thing with for loops is that they repeat a bunch of times, like for something in something. And that might sound a little bit confusing, but just to explain this example, this is one way of writing a for loop. And in this case, this block of code will repeat a bunch of times for this temporary variable item equaling each one of these things in this list that we're talking about. So item here is a temporary variable, and it's basically getting assigned once to each one of these things, just consecutively in order like this. And then for each one of those temporary variable assignments, it's going to execute this code in the for loop. So just to show an example, let's just try like printing out item. And this doesn't have to only be one line. It's like with the if statements, we could have a bunch of lines here. In fact, maybe we can also print like a blank line just to show you guys. But yeah, so basically it's going to go through and repeat this code a bunch of times, where each time the temporary variable item is assigned to equal each one of these things in the list. So yeah, start running this, and then you guys will see what I'm talking about. Okay, yeah, looks like it worked. So yeah, that's just hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Yeah, it's just going through. This doesn't have to be called item. This can be any variable name that we want to give it. So we could also say like element, and then run it again, and it'll be the same thing. So again, just this element here is just the name of the temporary variable that's being used in the for loop to be assigned to each one of these things in the list. We could even just call it like that or something. You know what I mean? Just some like gibberish. As long as it's a valid variable name, it'll be fine to use. But yeah, just by convention, I'll typically just call them like item or element or something like that, just to have the code like kind of make sense. Yeah. Okay, so let's just to like further play around with these. Let's try another example. So I'm going to comment this out for now, and then I'm going to make another list that's going to be called test list, and this is going to be a list of numbers. So I'm just going to say 4, 7, negative. Oh, whoops! Sorry, I forgot the brackets here. Whoops, sorry guys. 4, 7, negative 1, 5.5, 100, and negative 1,000. And yeah, just to show you guys, I'll say like for this time I'll call it num because it's in numbers. So I'll say for num in test list colon. Maybe we can print. Here is the number, and then print num, print a blank line. Maybe I'll just print like here is the number squared, and then print num squared. Remember, to do this the square, we don't use this operator. We actually use two of the multiplication operators to do the exponents. And then just another blank line. So yeah, this is just another example to like play around with as a little practice. Just showing you guys that yeah, the for loop, we have this temporary variable that goes through and runs this block of code a bunch of times, where each time the temporary variable is referencing each element in the list, basically. And it just repeats until it's gone through all the elements. And then we can do whatever we want in this block of code. We can like have a bunch of print statements if we want to. We can do like calculations with the temporary variable, like squaring it or something. Yeah, basically any valid Python code we can put in this block of code to be repeated, basically. So yeah, let's try running this and see what it says. Yep, looks like it makes sense. Yeah, maybe just one more example dealing with for loops and lists, just to like drive the point home. Just gets a little bit more practice. I think the best way to like kind of understand what's going on with this code is to just like practice with examples, really. So we can say again like test list, and this one will be to show you guys that this will also work with a list of strings. So we can have the strings be like 1, 2, 3, and then we can say for item in test list colon print item plus item. You guys remember what that's going to do? Just try to think. And this is a bit of a review from a couple videos ago, but try to remember what happens when we add two strings together like this. Yeah, try to see if you can guess what the output of this code will be. There'll be a little bit of practice, a little bit of review, and then a blank line. And yeah, looks like it works. If you guys remember, when we add two strings together, we're just combining the strings like that, basically. But yeah, looks like it works. So that's just an example showing you guys it'll work with a list of strings as well. Okay. So that's one way of doing for loops. There's another way where instead of dealing with a list, we're dealing with numbers in a range. So to do it that way, rather than saying like for item in the name of our list, we're going to say for number, for example. Again, this can be any valid variable name. This is just the name of the temporary variable that we're using in the for loop. But just to make it make sense, I'll just call it number. So I'll say for number in range, and then it gives us, yeah, this is why like idle is nice. Like it gives us a hint of what the arguments for this like range function are. So it's going to be start and then stop. Yeah. So it's going to be the number we want to start at, and then the number we want to stop at, where this last number is not being included. So this will go from 3 up to, but not including 10, basically. Okay, so then just to see what it's doing, we can just print out the number. And try running that. Yeah, so what this is doing is rather than assigning the temporary variable to each item in a list, it's assigning it to each number in a range. So it's going like, it's having this number temporary variable equal 3, and then execute the block of code, and then have it equal 4, execute the block of code, have it equal 5, execute the block of code, and so on and so on. Just having this temporary variable equal each number in the range. And we can do a little bit of math in here too if we want to. So we could say like print number times 10 or something if we want to, just to see, and then maybe a blank line. Yeah. And then yeah, just to show you guys like a little bit more functionality too, we can we can, it's like I said, in this block of code that's being repeated, we can put in here like any valid Python code that we want to put. So we can also put in if statements if we want to. So for example, I'll just say like for each number, if we want to check the number with an if statement, maybe like if number greater than 5, for example, and then print number is greater than 5. Whoops. And then else print number is not greater than 5. Yeah, so this is just showing you guys that we can have a little bit of like complexity in these for loops if we want to. Yeah, so it starts saying that it's not greater than 5 when it's 3, 4, 5 is also not greater than 5. Then when it gets to 6, then it passes this if statement check and starts saying that it is greater than 5. Yeah, so a little simple example there. Yeah, it's like I said, within this block of code that's getting repeated in the for loop, we can have any kind of like valid Python code we want to. And we can even have within the for loop, we can even have another for loop. And that's what's called a nested for loop. When you have one for loop, and in the block of code for that for loop, you have another for loop. So you have like 2 loops, or even more. You could even have like 3 or as many as you want. But yeah, just to show an example of that, I'll say nested for loop as a little comment here. And then for num1 in range 2 to 10. Remember, that's starting at 2 up to 10, but not including 10. Colon, indent the next line. Then I'll say like print num1. And then for num2 in range, make it like 2 to 5. So that's starting at 2 up to 5, not including 5. And then print num2, and then print num1 times num2. Okay, and then back in our first for loop, maybe just another blank line. Yeah, okay. So this one, yeah, I mean, hopefully this makes sense to you guys. Sometimes these nested loops, you have to like wrap your head around them a little bit. Just wrap your head around like the order of the execution. But yeah, I think the best way, if any of it is confusing to you guys, the best way to understand it better is to just like play around with it yourself. Try writing some of these loops and try predicting what the output is going to be. And then once you can like pretty confidently predict the output, then that'll mean that you have a pretty solid understanding of how these like nested loops work. Yeah, so there's one more cool thing we can do with loops that I'm going to show you guys. So I showed you guys like how to deal with like items in lists as well as numbers in a range. But we can also use this like number in a range method to iterate through lists if we want to. So just to give an example, yeah, let's again just take this like test list that we had before. Have this test list, and then do you guys remember from like the previous video? I think it was, yeah, the previous video. If we want to get the length of a list, or wait, maybe whoops, sorry, maybe I actually forgot to show this to you guys. Maybe I didn't show you guys the length method. Whoops, sorry about that. So my bad on that one. I forgot that in the last video. But yeah, if you want to get the length of how many elements are in a list, you can use this nice little like built-in Python function len, and then it's just len parentheses and then the name of your list and then close parentheses. And then of course, if we want to actually see what it is, we have to print it out. So this will tell us the length of our list, basically how many elements are in the list. So in this case, it's 6 because we have 6 elements. Remember, with lists, the indexing starts at 0. The indices are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the length is 6 because there's 6 elements. So another way to iterate through the list and look at each element is we can say for index, and again, this can be called anything, any valid variable name. Call it index, call it ind, call it I. Those are some of the common ones, but for now, just call it index. For index in range, let's start at 0 and go up to the length of my list. So this is starting at 0 and going up to 6, but not including 6. So it's going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when we use the numbers in this range like this, it'll give us a repeat of this for loop code block for index equaling every possible index of this list that we're dealing with, because it's starting at 0 and it's going up to but not including the length of how many elements are in the list. Yeah. So yeah, basically another way of iterating through these for loops, another way of iterating through these lists is to go like for index in range from 0 to the length of the list. And then we can say like maybe x equals my list at index, where if you guys remember, this is just how we get elements in a list. So if we say like test list 0, that'll give us this element 4, index 0. 1 will give us this element 7, and so on and so on. So basically, this block of code will basically like, for index equaling all the numbers from 0 up to but not including 6, it'll set index to be that number, and then we can use that number as the index to pull that element out of the list if we want to, and then like do something with it. Like maybe then we print x squared, print a blank line, and yeah, hopefully that will work. And whoops. Oh, sorry guys, little name error on my end. This should be called test list, not my list. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, looks like it's working now. Yeah, again, it just sets index to be every number in this range from 0 to up to 6, but not including 6, because that's the length of our list in terms of how many elements it has. And then when we use the for loop to go through the numbers like that, then we can use this index temporary variable as the actual index to unpack items out of this list and do stuff with them if we want to. And I wrote it this way just to make it easier on you guys, just so we know that it's starting at 0 and going up to this endpoint. But actually, there's an even easier way to write it, because if we just don't include a start index and only put one number here, then it'll treat 0 as the start index by default. So running it this way, we'll get the same thing. So yeah, this is actually the easiest way to write it. Is if you just put the endpoint, it'll assume that 0 is the start point, like just by default. But yeah, I think I'm just gonna write it like with the 0 explicitly, just because this is supposed to be a beginner video, and I just want to make it like clear exactly what's going on. Okay, so that's all I have for you guys for this video. Yeah, I guess maybe this can be a little bit of a confusing topic. I know with beginners, this is sometimes, and especially like these like nested for loops, these are sometimes a little bit confusing for beginners. But if anyone has any questions, or if anything in this video is unclear, please just let me know in the comments any questions that you have, and then I'll try to answer them and clear up any confusion that you guys have. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys for today. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.